In 1948, a young girl exited a theater in Galkana, Alaska. As she walked out into the night, she would have noticed that it was an extremely clear night. Also, the aurora borealis, or the northern lights, were extremely bright that night. The northern lights were so bright that they reflected off of the 16,000-foot peak Mount Sanford that stood in front of her. As the girl walked out of the theater, she looked up at the exact moment that a DC-4 airplane traveling from Shanghai, China to New York crashed into the side of Mount Sanford. She didn't actually see the airplane, it was the explosion that caught her eye and the fire traveling down the side of the mountain. She didn't know it at the time, but there were 24 passengers and 6 crew members that died on impact. It was also believed at the time that these 24 crew members' payroll of gold was also on the plane. Welcome to Hidden Treasures. This is the story of the payroll plane of Galkana, Alaska. Galkana, Alaska is a small town that sits in the shadow of Mount Sanford. It's a wonderful little area with a bunch of small towns. This area is known for its rivers and streams, for fishing, for camping, hiking, hunting, anything that you would generally associate with the great Alaskan wilderness. Flight 4422 was a DC-4 that was chartered from Shanghai, China to New York. There were 24 merchant seamen on board, and these seamen had just finished a job transporting a tanker in Taiwan. At the time, many people believed that the seamen were paid in gold and that this payroll was on the flight with the seamen when it crashed into the side of Mount Sanford. Not only that, but there's also a mystery behind the crash. If the skies were clear enough for this girl to see the crash, how was it possible that this plane flew into the side of a 16,000-foot mountain? There are many questions surrounding this flight, this crash, and what happened, so let's start from the beginning. Between Shanghai, China and Anchorage, Alaska, nothing out of the ordinary happened. It was a completely normal flight and everything went as expected. On March 12, 1948 at 8:12 p.m. local time, the DC-4 took off from Anchorage, Alaska, headed for its final destination of New York. At 8:28, Flight 4422 reported that they had reached their cruise altitude of 11,000 feet, and at 9:02, they had reported that they were over Galkana. Shortly before this last transmission, the flight had been seen traveling 4 miles south of Galkana radio station. Mount Sanford is approximately 42 miles from Galkana range station. Mount Sanford is a dormant volcano that stands at an elevation of just over 16,000 feet. As the cruise altitude of Flight 442 is only 11,000 feet, a 16,000-foot mountain is a huge obstacle in their path. However, this is a known and well-traveled route, and there is a path around the mountain that most pilots adhere to. However, on clear nights, as this was, it's also very common for pilots to deviate from this path and take a more direct route that takes them closer to the mountain, but cuts off about 20 miles of travel distance. The problem with this more direct route is that there are no bearings, so the pilot has to navigate visually. The pilot needs to see the mountain, fly around it, which shouldn't be a problem at all in high visibility with experienced pilots. It was at approximately 9:15 p.m. that the impact and the fire was observed on the side of Mount Sanford. Subsequent radio communications from Northway and the Galkana radio stations proved non-responsive. When reports started coming in about the fire on the side of the mountain and putting that together with the non-responsive radio communications, it was concluded that Flight 4422 had crashed into the side of Mount Sanford. At approximately 11:30 p.m., a pilot took off from Galkana Airport. The pilot flew at about 10,000 feet looking for wreckage on the side of the mountain. The pilot didn't see any debris on the side of the mountain, but he did report that it was an unlimited ceiling and he had visibility up to 50 miles. How did a plane with experienced pilots fly into the side of a 16,000-foot mountain with perfect visibility? Just as the girl back in the town had said, the search pilot also observed that the aurora borealis was extremely bright that night. The pilot described the aurora as unusually bright and like hanging curtains that obscured the mountain for up to 5 minutes at a time. Although weather reports had predicted that there could be clouds at the top of the mountain at this time, no one ever observed any clouds that night. The final accident report concluded that the aurora was reflecting off of the mountain and completely obscured it from the pilot's visibility, and the pilot simply crashed into the side of the mountain. The next day, officials from the Civil Aeronautics Board, Civil Aeronautics Administration, and Northwest Airlines searched for the wreckage. They found the impact site at about 7,500 feet and the final resting place of the wreckage at about 5,000 feet. The impact site was actually changed later on to about 10,000 or 11,000 feet based on altimeter variances due to the cold weather that were unknown at the time. When they found the final wreckage, they recorded that the wreckage was in a glacial cirque. The slopes on the side were constantly dropping ice and snow onto the wreckage, and that an avalanche was imminent. There was no way that within a few days anyone was going to be able to get down to the wreckage. That avalanche did occur. It covered up most of the wreckage, and no one was able to get to it for the next 50 years. However, people tried. Several groups of treasure hunters mounted expeditions looking for that lost gold from what was now being dubbed the payroll plane. Gold was the designated payment for these 24 passengers that had transported this tanker to Taiwan. Most people believed at that time that this gold had been paid prior to Flight 4422. So there were treasure hunters that were going to go up onto the side of this mountain, risk their lives to go and try and find that gold. On one expedition, they even hauled a bunch of ladders up there, tied all of these ladders together, and tried to get down into this cirque to try and get this gold. The slopes were way too steep, it was way too dangerous, the weather was terrible, and they had to leave before anyone died. Over the course of 50 years, there were several expeditions of people trying to get up there to find this gold, but no one was ever able to make it. But in 1997 and 1998, First Officers Mark Milliken and Kevin McGregor made 6 expeditions to the location. They found debris scattered all across the side of the mountain, but they knew that they could land and they could hike up there and that they could get to some of this debris. They were able to find debris that confirmed that this wreckage that they had found was actually from Flight 4422. The 2 pilots also found the remains of some of the passengers and some of the crew that had been frozen there for the last 50 years. They were actually able to find a mummified left arm, and in 2007 they fingerprinted this. The results came back verifying that this was a merchant marine. He was one of the 24 passengers. It was Joseph Francis Van Zant. He was a 36-year-old from Roanoke, Virginia. At the time, this was the oldest known fingerprint identification. During their expedition, no gold was found. It has also been reported that the payment was supposed to be made on arrival in New York City. Also, the families of these 24 crew members reportedly confirmed receiving the payment that was owed. Over 50 years, there were multiple expeditions where people went out risking their lives to find gold that wasn't even there. We've also seen this more recently with Forrest Finn's treasure and the multiple tragedies that happened there. So if you're going out treasure hunting, don't forget to be prepared, be smart, and be safe. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Don't forget to like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.